I first noticed the eyes the week the house learned my name. It was a whisper at first, a pinch of sound carried on old wood and pipes, a creak that became a syllable, a draft that settled into shape. Eli. Not even my full name, Elias, but the version my mother used when I would come in from the yard with skinned knees and dirt on my tongue. The house shouldn't have known that, and yet it replied to my footsteps with the small kindness of a familiar call. I had come to the old place on Coleridge Lane after a winter of failed prospect and fraying sleep. The house was a foreclosure, a putty-colored two-story with a crooked porch and a yard choked by weeds that made a sound like static when the wind moved through them. The realtor told me about great bones. The inspection report listed bowing joists, hairline cracks, historic fabric, which is a term people use when they mean rot that has been painted over for long enough to be considered charming. Still, it was mine, a place to say I owned something more substantial than debt and duffel bags. I bought a crowbar and a sledgehammer. I watched videos about plaster and lathe, about how wall cavities carry voices, how old paint holds secrets in leaded breath. I told myself that the voices I'd hear while working would be podcasts, the hum of the radio, the boring repetition of advertisements for mattresses and mail-in prescriptions. That was a mistake. I left the radio off that first week so I could appreciate the birds. On the second night, at 2:18 a.m., the house learned my name. I woke with the uncanny certainty that I'd been touched. My skin kept echoing the sensation, the way a struck tuning fork keeps vibrating long after the stroke. I lay there and held my breath, trying to trick time into moving backwards. The street outside was empty. The refrigerator was a faint heartbeat down the stairs. Somewhere, water ticked in a pipe. Then, Eli. It was more breath than voice, and more house than breath, as if someone had spoken through a mouthful of sawdust from behind a drywall seam. In that adrift second, I didn't think of intruders or neighbors or pranksters. I thought of gaps, of spaces between the studs, the quiet highways behind every home, the dark lanes of insulation dust where you imagine mice study the map of your life and choose their routes. I told myself it was a draft. I closed the bedroom window. The sash, when I pulled it down, made a low, dragging sound, a voice with a bad throat. I slid the lock and returned to bed. Sleep did not return to me. It came again 2 nights later, just before 3. Eli. This time from inside the wall beyond the headboard, a thin membrane of paint and gypsum between my skull and the thing that knew how to shape my name from air. I turned on the lamp. The moment light hit, the sound stilled like a breath held underwater. I stared at the wall. It stared back. That was the first time I saw them. The eyes were not painted or drawn. They were not holes. They were suggestions. The way a stain can look like a dog or a saint if you're asked to see it. But these were too precise for suggestion. 2 roundings of shadow at a regular distance, a fleck of darker matte in the center that seemed deliberately placed, a faint ring of plaster around each, as if something had pressed there once, and hard, and the wall had kept the memory. Light changed them. In the day, they washed out to nothing. At night, under the small amber lamp, they defined themselves, an idea assembled by the dimness. I pressed my fingers to them. The plaster was cool and faintly damp, like skin in a basement. I told myself, water. The roof joint above this wall was bad. Rain from last year could have crept down. I told myself, old nails bleeding rust in a pattern I was too tired to understand. I told myself 100 explanations that someone else had written, and all the while the wall kept its eyes half open and learned the rhythm of my breathing. I work with my hands. I trust the things I can measure. So I measured the distance between the highs, 2.5 inches center to center. Too narrow for a person, too narrow for most animals. I put a tape measure along the floor and found stud locations by tapping. The core of every house, the hidden ribs. The eyes sat between studs. Behind them would be a cavity, a vertical tunnel of air and dust and time. I told myself, maybe a knot in the lathe boards beneath the plaster, maybe a ghost of wood showing through. On the 5th night, I moved the bed away from that wall. I slept on a mattress across the room, like a camp bed in a place I couldn't afford to leave. At 2:43, the house called me again, a little bolder now, as if trying on my name in different moods. Eli. I didn't turn on the light, not right away. I lay and watched the place where the eyes had been. The dark there was deeper than the rest. I thought of the way a closed closet always looks like a mouth in dreams. "Say it again," I said. The room held its breath for a beat too long. Then the house obliged. Eli, it sighed, and darling God, it came from behind me this time, from the opposite wall, the one with the closet, the one that hadn't had eyes before. I turned. 2 more impressions had surfaced there, faint as submerged moons. They were lower on the wall, near the baseboard, a child's height. The paint around them was bubbled, as if it had tried to blister itself closed. I laughed, a dry, nervous sound that even I didn't believe. "There's got to be a leak," I said to the empty room. "There's got to be a leak." The next morning, I pulled up a section of the bedroom baseboard and cut a square out of the drywall with a utility knife. Plaster dust plumed like pale breath. My blade, when it met the lathe, made that sound of teeth on bone that makes your shoulders rise. Behind the lathe was a lidded darkness. I slipped my phone in and took a picture. The image showed a vertical shaft, the back of plaster, the ribbed shadows of wood slats, rusted nails, a desiccated hornet's nest like a clenched fist. And faintly, no, not faintly, plainly, once you knew how to see, the round marks of pressure from the other side of the plaster. Not holes, not breaches, pressures. As if something had rested its face against the wall, time and again. For so long it had left the shape of its attention in the fabric of the house. I patched the wall. It was an ugly patch. The paint didn't match. That night, the eyes were gone from that spot. They returned an hour later, 2 feet to the right. The human mind is a tool designed for survival, which means it is a tool designed for lying. It lies to itself to keep going. It tells you that the noise is the fridge when it is the front door. It tells you that the shape is a coat when it is a person. It told me that relocation of a stain could be explained by humidity, by wicking, by temperature differential. I accepted all of this until the night the eyes blinked. Blinking is a miracle. It is how the body resets. It is a little sleep. We forget we do it. We forget that the world is built out of flashes of darkness interrupted by light. When the eyes in the wall blinked, the room turned off for the length of a heartbeat. The lamp still burned. The sound of the street still thinned against the glass. But the wall stuttered. The eyes shut and opened, not with lids. I saw no lashes, no skin, but with a soft retraction of attention and a return. As if the thing behind the plaster had flinched, then pressed closer. I left the room. I slept on the couch downstairs with an Afghan from a thrift store, pulled to my chin, breathing through my mouth, afraid my nose made too much noise. Twice in the dark, I felt someone bend low to listen to me. The house settled. The house took me in like a breath taken and held. The next day, I made the first of several bad decisions. I spoke to the house as if it were a person. "I can hear you," I said, standing in the living room where the previous owners had left a yellowed rectangle on the wall, some painting or mirror removed and taken away. "I know you can hear me." The house is a machine that moves sound wonderfully. In the walls, voice becomes everything at once, hiss and resonance and crackle. When I spoke, it felt as if I had poured oil into gears that had rusted stiff. The engine of the place tried to turn, floorboards clicked like teeth. "I don't know what you want," I said, "but I want to sleep." "Eli," it said, this time not from any particular wall, but from the space between all walls, like the word had been written across the house's lungs and then exhaled. Dust lifted invisibly and hung there, a galaxy revealed by a slant of light. "What do you want?" I asked again. The house didn't have words for desire. It found the best it could. In here it tried. The syllables stretched like warm gum. "In here, Eli." No, I thought, and that thought was not brave. It was a boy's refusal to open a closet after a nightmare. "No," I said aloud. "No." That evening, I left. I didn't pack. I took my keys and my wallet and drove until the houses thinned and the road decided to go straight. I parked at the reservoir. Wind ticked in the scrub, and I listened to the world without walls. For a long time, I sat on the hood and let the cold sink its teeth into me. The sky was the color of a bruise. In it, no eyes. Only stars that were too far away to care about my small fear. By midnight, I told myself what adults tell themselves. You will feel foolish in the morning, but you will at least have slept. I went back. The house welcomed me like a mouth takes back a word. It was warm in there. Heat has a way of hiding where it is not needed. The old thermostat clicked, and the baseboards had that baked paint smell of radiators that remember 12 winters back. I stood in the hall for a while and watched the shadows on the stairs move in time with the branch outside the window. Then I went up. My bedroom door was open. I had left it closed. That's okay, I told myself, because this is when the mind should lie. I must have left it open. The light inside was on. I had left it on. I stepped in and felt air move on my face, a thin wind like the house had drawn breath and let it go past me. The eyes were not in their usual places. They were in the corner to the left of the window, lower than before, clustered, 2 pairs side by side, as if 2 faces had leaned there together to share a view. There was a tension in that patch of wall, a wish to swell. "No," I said softly. I reached for the lamp and turned the shade, so the light spilled directly on them. When I did, the room changed. Heat ricocheted off the plaster in a way it hadn't before. The amber deepened. In the light, the eyes did not vanish. They sharpened. The tiny, dark centers drank the glow. And something inside the wall pressed forward in longing, in the way a hand with too many knuckles might press from underneath a fabric to feel the shape of the light. You cannot keep your life from turning strange once it decides to. You can only decide how graciously to go with it. I slept in that room because I was tired to the bones, because the reservoir had drained me, because when the house said my name the fourth time that night, it sounded hungry in a way that offended me. I dreamed of narrow spaces. In the dream, the house stood at the center of a revolving sky. The walls had been peeled back like rind. Inside them, not pipes and wires and nests, not gravity, not secrets, but corridors made of lightless air, upright and thin. Eyes were set like stones along those hallways, and as I walked, a pressure parted to let me pass, like bodies pressed together on a train that must rearrange to admit one more. When I woke, the sense of those halls did not leave me. It was like having learned a new word and now hearing it everywhere. Days I filled with activity. I tore up carpet and found wood floors that had been hidden and unloved. I sanded until grit coated my hands like new fingerprints. I painted over water stains that resembled maps of countries no longer existent. I found a small door in the attic behind a rack of old wardrobe hooks, a low square that must have led to a crawl space past the eaves. It was painted shut with a patience that made me curious. I sliced the seam with a blade. When I pulled it open, a smell came out that was not animal and not mold. It was the smell of a room you're not supposed to see, a faint sweetness that felt like a trick. The space beyond was shallow and triangular, too small for anyone but a child to enter without crawling. I set the little door back into place and nailed it shut again, with an efficiency that surprised even me. Nights, the eyes propagated like a rumor. 2 in the hallway outside the bathroom, at shin height. 2 on the landing near the base of the stairs, exactly where my own eyes point when I sit on the second step to tie my shoes. 2 in the kitchen, just above the backsplash, shining faintly in the reflection on the black glass of the stove. I would turn, likely to catch them in the act of being something else, but they would simply persist, docile as stains, patient as glances you pretend not to notice, so they will not become a conversation. Once, at 3:36, I put my ear to the kitchen wall between the eyes. It was like listening to the ocean in a conch made of lead. There was movement in there, subtle as a thought, a brushing, a shift, like someone thinking about tapping, then deciding not to. "Speak," I said. My breath fogged the paint. The house obliged, not through the wall this time, but through the floor. From the basement, a voice rose like warm air. "In here, Eli, in here." It had learned the cadence now. It could place emphasis. Sometimes it tried different forms. Ear, Lee. Once, charmingly, L. Light. I could have laughed if my hands hadn't been shaking. I told myself I would not go into the basement. I went into the basement. The steps were a ladder pretending to be a staircase. Pipes crossed like instruments being tuned. The cement floor wore stains like arguments that had been lost. I swung the pull chain and a frayed little bulb blinked, then steadied. In the far corner by the old oil tank, the wall, fieldstone and mortar, showed a faint, circular wetness. 2 spots within that circle were darker than the rest. 2 more suggestions. After a week of practice, my mind knew at once what shape to assign to those stains. "I won't," I said to the basement, to the house, to the old tank that smelled of rust and rained on pennies. "I won't." "In here," said the house. And this time the voice came with a feeling, a practical thing like the pull of a magnet. A pressure behind the sternum encouraging a step forward. It was not cruel. It was not even persuasive in a human way. It was the way a well draws a bucket, the way a locked door draws a key. If something has a shape, it wants to be filled by the thing that fits. Houses are shapes, humans are keys. I went up the stairs without running, because it felt important not to be prey just yet. The next morning, I called the realtor. I said my cousin was in town and interested in the place. I said I wanted the original blueprints, if they had them, out of curiosity. She said she'd look in the file. She sent me a photograph an hour later, a brittle page with neat lines, the bones of the place sketched with a care that felt like an apology. I stared at the plan. The rooms were as I knew them, but something scuffed at me. The measurement of the hallway upstairs, the depth of the wall that backed the bedroom. It was thicker on the plan than in reality. There was a void where no void should be. Between my bedroom and the closet, the blueprint showed a 3-foot gap with no explanation. A cavity not used for pipes or the chase for the chimney. It had no hatch indicated, no door. The line of the wall just thickened, as if the drafter's hand had stumbled and doubled itself. I took it as a challenge. At noon, with sun pouring at the right angle to make a day feel faithful, I measured against the plan and tapped, light, then hard, listening for the hollow. The hollow laughed. That's the only way to say it. My knuckles made a sound that came back with a little kick, a bright echo. I marked a rectangle with pencil. The old paint accepted the line without complaint. I cut with care. The plaster gave reluctantly, as if it had a reason not to let go. Dust plumed. Lathe bared its ribbed smile. I pried 3 slats free, and the wall exhaled cool air that smelled of forgotten laundry and the ash of letters burned carefully decades ago. The cavity was larger than a chase. It was a miniature room, long as a coffin and higher than my waist, running the length of the wall. The inside had been papered once, in a pattern of little gold leaves that had blackened. Along the far side, near the floor, someone had drawn 2 small circles in charcoal, perfectly spaced, just at the height where a person lying on their side would be able to press their eyes to them and see into the room beyond, my room. The circles had been smudged by long contact. Around them, the paper was stained darker, 2 halos where skin had rested, until the oils spoke through paper and plaster to future occupants. I did not lean in. I did not put my eyes to those marks. I set the slats carefully aside, as if neatness could defend me. And then, because the human mind is designed to lie until it runs out of room, I told myself the simplest story. A child's hiding place. A secret game. There is sadness in that story, but not hunger. You can live with sadness. I could not live with the sense, now obvious, that homes are built with spaces in them not to hold wires, but to hold the attention of things we were better at ignoring when we were animals. I sealed the wall. I screwed plywood over the opening. I painted it the same meal-colored cream. That night, I slept on the couch again. At 3:09, the plywood creaked as if knuckles had rapped it from inside. You can identify sounds. That one was familiar. The polite knock of a delivery person. 2 quick, 1 slow. Then the soft drag of fingertips tracing a rectangle, learning the border. In here, the house murmured, pleased like an infant after milk. In here. Who are you? I asked. For the first time, I asked the right question. It tried. I heard it search. Some rattling passed through the ducts as if words were nuts rolling along a tin roof. Finally, I said. The man paused in the doorway, as if remembering whether he had ever left. The house recognized him first. the air shifted with a low, delighted groan, like wood remembering weight. I couldn't see his face, just the faint reflection on the floorboards where the light from the hall caught a pair of shoes, then the outline of legs. He moved without hurry. Each step found the boards that creaked my name. He wasn't humming, but something about the rhythm of his breathing felt rehearsed, like a song half swallowed by walls. "Who's there?" I asked. The words came out as a whisper, thin and tremoring, as if the house had already begun to digest them. The man didn't answer. He stopped halfway down the hall, close enough that the faint lamplight from the living room brushed his side. The shape was my height, my build. His head tilted, slow and uncertain, as though he were listening through the wood. "Eli," he said finally, my name, but the voice wasn't his. It was mine. I rose without meaning to, every joint trembling under the weight of recognition. My mouth was dry. "Who are you?" I asked, though the answer was already forming behind my ribs. "In here," the house said, but the voice came from both of us now. Him, me, the walls, the spaces between. Every nail, every seam echoed the phrase until it filled the air like thick fog. The man stepped closer. His face tilted into the light. It was me, pale, thinner, the skin tight as plaster, eyes wide and hollow as the ones on the walls. He smiled, not cruelly, but with the resigned sadness of someone who's finally been found. "You left the door open," he said. My voice again, my cadence. We waited. I stumbled back, hit the wall. The surface was cold and soft beneath my palms, as though it had forgotten how to be solid. Something pulsed from within it, a slow, wet heartbeat that kept time with mine. The other me tilted his head, listening to that rhythm. His pupils dilated, black and deep. "You hear it now, don't you?" The breathing. The house only wants to keep what listens. The lights flickered. For a moment, the room dimmed enough for the eyes to return. Dozens of them all around us, blinking in slow, uneven rhythm. They weren't flat anymore. They bulged slightly through the plaster, moist outlines pressing forward like something testing the tension of its own skin. "Stop," I said, "stop it." The man, I, took one more step until we were almost touching. He reached up, his fingers shaking as they hovered an inch from my face. "It's easier," he whispered. "When you stop fighting the house, it stops needing to call your name." Behind him, the walls swelled, a breath drawn in. The plaster cracked in a perfect circle, like a pupil widening. The eyes blinked once. When they opened, they were no longer still. They moved, tracking me, their attention heavy and alive. "I'm not you," I managed to say. He smiled again, the corners of his mouth trembling. "That's what I said." The floor shifted beneath us. The house sighed, a long, low exhale that made the glass in the windows tremble. The man's outline blurred at the edges, like wet paint spreading on paper. For an instant, I saw the boards of the wall behind him through his chest. Then he stepped back, into the wall. The plaster rippled like water swallowing a stone. His body sank until only his face remained pressed just beneath the surface. 2 eyes, a faint curve of mouth. The paint bulged outward where his lips might have been. His breath fogged from inside the wall. "In here, Eli." I turned for the door, but it wasn't there anymore. Only the long, unbroken surface of plaster stretching where the frame had been. My fingertips slid along it, searching for the seam. None, just smooth, cold skin. Behind me, the wall throbbed once, then again, a heartbeat, not mine. The lamp flickered and died. In the dark, These eyes opened, hundreds now, all at once, filling every wall, the ceiling, the floor. The faint sound of breathing surrounded me, layer over layer, like the ocean inhaling itself. Then the whisper came, softer than ever. "We see now. We see right." The air grew heavy. My knees gave. I pressed my hands to the floor and felt movement under the boards, small and deliberate, as though fingers were tracing my palms from underneath. The boards flexed. One cracked. Something beneath was trying to come up, or maybe to pull me down. I closed my eyes. The darkness inside them wasn't empty. It was full of watching. When I opened them again, I was standing in the hallway. Morning light leaked through the window at the end, thin and gray. The air was still. The house was quiet. For a moment, I thought I had dreamed it. The walls were bare. The eyes were gone. Then I saw it halfway down the hall, where the sunlight caught the plaster just right. 2 faint circles, side by side. Not stains this time, not shadows. Fresh impressions, still damp. The paint there was a shade lighter, as though someone had pressed their face to the wall only hours ago and breathed through it. The eyes blinked once. "Good morning, Eli."